I'm a solo mum flipping furniture to fund my dream home, and I found this piece on the side of the road. Let me tell you, I've never stopped my car so fast. It actually didn't fit in my car properly. I had to ratchet strap my boot closed to get it in, but there was no way that I wasn't coming home with this. It did have some weird little holes, like someone had attacked it with a fork, the finish was coming off and it was missing a handle, but this type of piece is the perfect candidate for a raw timber flip, and I'm going to walk you through step by step exactly how I take this from orange into a natural beige raw timber finish tone. I started by removing all of the handles so that I could clean the piece properly. Now, it is an essential step. Do not skip this if you are flipping a piece of furniture, regardless of whether you are painting it or if you are doing a raw timber finish like this. You have to start with a clean canvas. So I go around and I vacuum everything down, and then I use Crud Cutter everywhere. So I get a little brush you can see here, and I'm getting into that trim, and I make sure to come around with some hot water after I have scrubbed everything down, just to remove any of the residue from the Crud Cutter. You also want to make sure that you're getting in and under the drawers as well. Don't skip that. Once everything was thoroughly cleaned, I went around and actually hand sanded the trim. So the finish on this one came off so easily that I didn't actually have to strip it. You could strip it if you wanted to, but everything was coming off really easily. I actually flipped it over so that I could do the trim on the top. I did try out my carbide scraper, but it wasn't really working effectively because it was a curved edge. It wasn't a square trim. I then moved on to the top of the piece. This is with 120 grit sandpaper, so you can see how easily that finish is coming off. And 120 grit sandpaper is a great starting point when you are sanding a piece of furniture. You're less likely to get those little pigtail swirly whirlies in there, and a lot of the time the 120 grit sandpaper will cause less friction on the top, so you're not going to be heating up the finish that is on it, and you won't be gunking up your sandpaper discs. Once the top was done, it was time to move on to the front of the piece. And again, this is 120 grit sandpaper, and it was coming off so easily. I did not have to spend a lot of time sanding this one at all. Moving on to the side of the piece, I did go up my grade of sandpaper to 180 grit because I had timber veneer. So it was only timber veneer on these two sides, so I knew I had to go low and slow. And it's always a good idea to do this if you notice that you have timber veneer on your piece. Timber veneer is just paper thin timber. So you do run the risk, if you are too aggressive with your sanding, of punching through and exposing the particle board that's underneath. So if you use a grade of sandpaper, say 180 grit to 240 grit, you can go low and slow, and you are less likely to expose that particle board, but you will get the finish off. Once everything was completely sanded down, I went around and filled in those weird little fork holes. So this was with wood filler, and I matched the tone to what I want my piece to look like in the end. Once it was dry, I went back with 240 grit sandpaper and smoothed everything down, ready for my paint wash. I used two colors for my paint wash today. I had a taupey tone, and I had a little bit of warmth in there as well, because I didn't want the piece to be, say, whitewashed, but I also didn't want it to be too warm. I have a comprehensive guide through the link in my bio that will walk you through step by step exactly how to take your orange pieces of furniture and turn them into something like this with varying shades. And I also include all of my color combinations in that guide. Once my paint wash had completely dried, it was time to seal. Now, I love to use Feast Watson hard wax. This is in their color Natural, and you can see that little depth of color that the wax gives, but we're not going to the really gold tone. Wax is fantastic to use on low to medium traffic areas like this. You will get a beautiful ultra matte finish. Even though it looks a little bit shiny here, it dries down ultra matte, and it is water resistant. Once the entire piece was waxed, it was time to get those handles on, and I just chose a classic black for this piece. And this is the end result. We've gone from an orange, outdated piece of furniture to something that is neutral and beautiful. It's not too warm, it's not too cool. You still get that raw timber element, but it's completely sealed. I love that you can still see that beautiful timber grain through there, a little bit of a sheen from the wax and the updated handles. What do you guys think?